I found the account by accident. At least, that's what I told myself at first. $850,000. Hidden.
Separate.
Untouched.
Not in our joint accounts.
Not in any portfolio I had access to. Not even under his usual banks. It was buried. Layered behind a shell account, then another, like he never wanted anyone to find it. Anyone except himself. I stared at the screen for a long time, because finding money wasn't the shocking part. It was what came with it. Transaction history. Regular withdrawals. Luxury hotels. Private dining. Gift purchases that never arrived at our house. And then one charge stopped me cold. Willow and Pine dinner for three.
3.
Not two. Not business.
3.
I remember sitting there in silence, my laptop glowing in the dark like it was exposing something I wasn't ready to see. Because up until that moment, I still had a version of him in my head.
Busy.
Distant. Overworked.
Not this.
Not someone building a life I wasn't part of. I should have confronted him. I should have asked questions. I should have slammed the laptop shut and demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I did something else. I closed the laptop. And the next morning, I made him breakfast like nothing had changed. That was the beginning. Not the discovery. The decision. Because once you know something like that, you have two choices. Explode. Or observe. And I chose to observe. Long day today? I asked, sliding a plate toward him. He smiled. That same easy, familiar smile.
Yeah.
Meetings. Might be late. Might be late. Of course. I nodded like I always did. Text me if you're staying out. Always do. He kissed my cheek, picked up his keys, and walked out the door. Just like every Thursday. Thursday. That word started to mean something very different after that. Because when I went back to the account later that day, the pattern became obvious. Every Thursday, withdrawals. Every Thursday, charges. Every Thursday, he disappeared. So I built a routine, not a confrontation, a system. I tracked everything.
Dates.
Amounts. Locations. Patterns. I opened a notebook and wrote it all down like I was studying for something important. Because I was. I was studying him. Week 1. $2,300, restaurant $1,100, boutique hotel $600, gifts. Week 2. $3,000, luxury suite $800, dinner $450, something labeled kids retail.
Kids.
That word again. I didn't cry. Not then. Crying is emotional. And emotions make you predictable. I needed to be the opposite of predictable. By week 3, I stopped guessing. I knew there was someone else. And not just someone. A life. A structured, consistent, repeated life. The kind that requires planning.
Time.
Money.
Commitment.
The kind you don't accidentally build. But here's the part that changed everything. I didn't stop him. I didn't interrupt. I didn't expose it. I let it continue. Because the truth is, $850,000 doesn't just appear. And it doesn't just disappear quietly either. Not without consequences. Not without records. Not without leverage. So instead of ending it, I leaned in. The next Thursday, I smiled when he left. Don't wait up, he said. I won't, I replied. And for the first time, that was true. I opened the account again. Watched the transfer happen in real time. $4,200.
Gone. Moved.
Spent.
Logged.
Documented. And then I did something he would never expect. I created access. Not to take the money.
Not yet.
But to understand every inch of where it moved. Because money tells stories people try to hide. And his story was getting clearer by the day. By week 5, I had names. Not directly, but close enough. Locations tied to reservations. Patterns tied to schedules. And one recurring detail. A small private school. Same drop-off time. Same weekly charge. Same location. I drove past it once. Just once. I told myself it was just curiosity. Just confirmation. Nothing more. Children laughing. Parents chatting. Normal life. Routine. Safe. And then I saw him. Across the street. Standing next to a woman. And a little girl holding his hand. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't rushed. He looked
Calm.
comfortable. At home. That was the moment something shifted. Because it wasn't just betrayal. It was replacement. I sat in my car and watched for exactly 3 minutes. No longer. No shorter. Because 3 minutes was enough. Enough to understand the scale. Enough to understand the lie. Enough to understand this wasn't temporary. I drove home. Cooked dinner. Set the table. Turned on the lights. And when he walked in that night, I smiled. "How was your day?" he asked. I looked at him. Really looked this time. At the man who thought I knew nothing. At the man who thought this would never catch up to him.
Quiet, I said.
"And yours?"
He loosened his tie.
Long. Of course it was. And that's when I made the final decision. I wasn't going to stop him. I wasn't going to expose him. I wasn't going to fight for someone who had already divided his life in two. I was going to let him continue. Because the more he spent, the more he built. And the more he built, the more there was to lose. And I already knew something he didn't. That $850,000? It wasn't as hidden as he thought. And more importantly, it wasn't as untouchable either. By the 6th week, I stopped thinking like a wife and started thinking like an auditor. There's something people don't realize about money. You can hide it. You can move it. You can rename it, layer it, bury it under 10 different entities. But you can't make it disappear. Not completely. Not if someone is patient enough to follow it. And I was patient. Every Thursday became predictable. Not just for him. For me. He would leave at 5:40 p.m. Same words. Same tone. Late meeting. And I would nod. Same smile.
Same calm.
Drive safe. But the moment the door closed,
My real routine began.
laptop open. Account loaded. Secondary tabs ready. Tracking software running. At first, I just watched. Then I started mapping. Because the money didn't just move randomly. It flowed. Like a system. Like something built with intention. From the main hidden account to a consulting LLC. From the LLC to 3 different vendors. From those vendors to payments that didn't match any real services. Fake invoices. Clean transfers. Perfect on paper.
But sloppy underneath.
He wasn't just cheating. He was laundering. And suddenly, this wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was leverage. Week 7. $5,800. Family retreat booking.
Family.
That word again. Week 8. $2,200. Tuition payment. Same school. Same location. Same child. I stopped writing notes after that. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to anymore. I understood the structure. He had built a second life. Not messy. Not accidental. Organized.
Maintained.
Funded. And the scariest part? He was comfortable. Comfort makes people careless. That's when I stopped observing and started preparing. I opened my own accounts. Quietly.
Carefully.
Legally. Not to steal. Not to touch his money. But to be ready. Because when something like this collapses, it doesn't collapse slowly. It implodes. And I needed to be standing somewhere safe when it did. The first step was simple. Documentation. I downloaded everything. Every transaction. Every timestamp. Every receipt. Every digital fingerprint he thought no one would follow. I backed it up 3 times. Different drives. Different locations. Different names. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that truth disappears very quickly when money is involved. The second step? Understanding the law. I didn't go to a lawyer right away. That would have been emotional. Reactive. Instead, I researched. At night. In silence. Marital assets. Hidden funds.
Fraud.
Tax exposure. And that's when it got interesting. Because that $850,000? It wasn't just hidden from me. It was hidden from everyone, including people who don't like being lied to. Which meant one thing. If I played this right, I wouldn't just walk away clean. I would walk away in control. But I still needed one thing. Confirmation. Not guesses. Not patterns. Proof. So on week 9, I changed the plan. I didn't stay home. I followed him. Not closely. Not recklessly. Just enough to see where the story ended. He drove across the city. Not to a hotel. Not this time. To a house. Quiet neighborhood. Tree-lined street. Safe. Suburban. Normal. I parked 2 blocks away. Watched from a distance. And then I saw it. The door opened. The same woman. The same little girl. He walked in like he belonged there. No hesitation. No tension. Like that was home. And I understood something in that moment that I hadn't fully accepted before. He wasn't escaping to that life. He was living it. Equally. Fully. And I was just the other half. I sat there longer than I should have. Not out of sadness. Not out of shock. But because I needed to feel nothing. And once I did, I drove away. That night, when he came home, something was different. Not in him.
In me.
How was your evening? I asked.
Same as always, he said.
And for the first time, I almost smiled. Because he wasn't lying very well anymore. He just thought he was. And that's the dangerous part. When someone believes their own story, they stop checking if it still makes sense. Which meant he would never see what was coming. But I still needed timing. Because revenge isn't about exposure. It's about precision. And timing? Timing is everything. So I waited. Not days. Not weeks. Months. I watched the account shrink.
Slowly. Predictably.
$850,000 became $720,000. Then $690,000. Then $640,000. And with every dollar he spent, he tied himself tighter to the lie, until leaving it would cost him everything. That's when I made my move. Not loud. Not dramatic.
Just one small step.
I scheduled a meeting with someone he would never expect. And that meeting was the beginning of the end. Because the truth wasn't just that he had another life. The truth was, I now controlled how both of them ended. The meeting was at 9:30 a.m.
Downtown.
Glass building. Quiet floors. The kind of place where everything looks clean even when it isn't. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not friends. Not family. And definitely not him. To him, it was just another normal day. Another Thursday coming up. Another routine he thought no one understood. But by then, I understood everything. The man I was meeting wasn't a lawyer. Not exactly. He was a forensic accountant. Someone who didn't just look at numbers. He read them. Walk me through what you have, he said, sliding a notebook toward me. I didn't rush. Didn't dramatize. Didn't explain emotions. Just facts. Amounts.
Dates.
Patterns. Accounts. I watched his face carefully as I spoke. Because people like him don't react emotionally. But they do react.
Subtly.
A pause. A raised eyebrow. A slight shift in posture.
And I saw it.
Right when I mentioned the layered accounts. That structure isn't accidental, he said. I didn't think so. He nodded slowly. Whoever set this up didn't want visibility. Not from a spouse. Not from auditors. Not from regulators. Regulators. That word landed differently. Is it illegal? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Which was answer enough. It depends, he said finally. But I'll tell you this, if someone starts asking questions, it won't stay quiet.
Good.
Because quiet wasn't useful anymore. Control was. He looked through the documents I brought. Scrolled.
Zoomed.
Connected dots faster than I had over months. And then he said something that changed everything. You're not just dealing with hidden money, he said. You're dealing with exposure. I leaned back slightly. Explain. If those transfers aren't reported correctly, if the entities aren't clean, if the income isn't declared, He paused. This becomes bigger than a marriage problem. I already knew that, but hearing it out loud made it real. So, what are my options? I asked. He met my eyes directly. You can walk away quietly. Or, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Or, I could decide exactly how loud this becomes. I closed the folder slowly. I'm not here to walk away quietly. For the first time, he gave a small smile. Then we do this carefully.
Carefully.
That was the key. Not revenge. Not anger. Precision. We built a plan.
Not fast.
Not reckless. Layer by layer. Step 1. Secure everything. Not emotionally. Legally. Accounts in my name. Assets separated. Documentation locked. Step 2.
Control timing.
Not when I was ready. When he was most vulnerable. And that required patience. Step 3. Say nothing. That was the hardest part. Because by then, I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew exactly who she was. Her name. Her routine. Her life. Not because I searched for her, but because he had already exposed everything through money. Payments. Subscriptions. Schedules. Money tells the truth people try to hide. And her life was built on his lies. Just like mine. But here's what made it different. She didn't know.
Not about me.
Not about the structure. Not about the fact that everything funding her life wasn't as safe as it looked. And that changed the equation. Because now, there were two people living inside his illusion. And only one person who could end it.
Me.
The next few weeks were quiet. On the surface, dinner conversations, normal routines, predictable lies. But underneath, everything was shifting. I stopped reacting, stopped engaging, stopped asking questions. And that made him comfortable. Too comfortable. People expect confrontation. They prepare for anger. But silence? Silence makes them careless. By month 4, the account dropped below $500,000. And that's when something interesting happened. He started moving money faster. Bigger transfers. Less spacing. Like he felt something coming. Not consciously, but instinctively. People always do. And instinct makes them sloppy. One transaction stood out. $120,000. Not for hotels. Not for dinners. For something labeled. Property allocation, phase 1.
Property.
That was new. That meant long-term. Commitment. Investment. A future. And that's when I realized he wasn't just maintaining 2 lives anymore. He was choosing one. And preparing to leave the other. I didn't panic. Didn't confront. Didn't even react. Because that decision was exactly what I needed. The more he invested there, the more he exposed himself here. So I let him. Watch the next transfer. $75,000. Then another. $40,000. And just like that, the plan accelerated. Because once money turns into assets, it becomes traceable in ways people don't expect. Ownership. Paper trails. Legal ties. Things that don't disappear easily. And that's when I scheduled the second meeting. Not with the accountant. With someone else. Someone who deals with consequences. Because phase 1 of his plan was about building a future. And phase 2 of mine was about deciding exactly how that future ends. The second meeting was nothing like the first. No glass walls. No quiet office. No polite conversation. This time it was a lawyer. Not the kind you call when you're upset. The kind you call when you're done. I sat across from her. The same folder in my hands, but now it felt heavier. Tell me everything, she said.
So I did.
Not as a wife. Not as someone betrayed. As someone presenting a case. By the time I finished, she didn't ask many questions.
She didn't need to.
You've been very patient, she said. I had to be. She nodded. Then she said something simple.
Good.
That's going to matter. Because this wasn't just about divorce anymore. This was about control. Hidden assets. Undeclared income. Financial misconduct. Words that don't just end marriages. They end stability, reputation, careers. If we move forward, she said carefully, this won't stay private. I held her gaze. I don't want private. For a second, silence. Then she leaned back slightly. Then we do this all at once. And that was the moment everything locked into place. Not slowly, not emotionally, decisively. We picked the date. Not random. Thursday. Of course. Because patterns matter. And endings should match beginnings. That Thursday started like every other one. Breakfast.
Coffee.
Routine. Late meeting tonight, he said. I smiled. I know. He paused for a fraction of a second. Not enough to question. Just enough to feel something. Then he left. And for the first time, I didn't open the account. I didn't need to anymore. Because everything was already in motion. At 10:00 a.m., the paperwork was filed. At 11:20 a.m., the first notices went out. At 1:45 p.m., accounts began to freeze. Not all. Just enough. Enough to interrupt. Enough to confuse. Enough to force attention. And at exactly 4:10 p.m., the final step happened. A formal disclosure request. Every account. Every transfer. Every hidden structure.
Exposed.
By the time he got to wherever he was going that night, the life he built there had already started collapsing. I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. Because chaos doesn't require an audience. It unfolds on its own. He called me at 6:32 p.m. I let it ring. He called again. And again. And again. By the fifth call, I answered. Hey, I said calmly. What did you do? He asked. No denial. No confusion. Just panic. Interesting. I stopped waiting, I said. Silence. You had no right. I almost laughed. No right? I repeated softly. Another pause. And then, he understood. Not everything, but enough. This isn't just divorce, he said. No, I replied. It's not. Because by then, it wasn't. It was exposure. Not emotional. Financial. Legal.
Permanent.
You're going to destroy everything, he said. I stood by the window, looking out at a city that suddenly felt very different. No, I said quietly. You already did that. And then I hung up.
He didn't come home that night.
Or the next. But the messages came. At first angry. Then desperate. Then careful. Because someone had explained things to him. Probably a lawyer. And lawyers have a way of turning panic into strategy. But it was too late for strategy. Because the truth had already started moving. And truth doesn't reverse easily. A week later, we sat across from each other again. Not in our kitchen. Not at our table. In a conference room. Neutral ground. He looked different. Not broken. Not defeated. Just aware. You could have just left, he said. I tilted my head slightly. You could have just told the truth. Silence. Fair enough. He exhaled slowly. What do you want? That question. People always ask it like it's about money. It never is. I want clarity, I said. He frowned slightly. Everything disclosed. Everything accounted for. Everything clean. And then, I looked at him. Really looked this time. At the man who built 2 lives. And thought he could balance both forever. Then we're done. No anger. No revenge in my voice. Just finality. Because that's what this was. Not an explosion. An ending. Controlled. Measured. Complete. The process took months.
Audits.
Reviews. Corrections. And, in the end, the number that mattered most wasn't $850,000. It was what remained after the truth. Much less than he expected. Much more than he deserved. As for the other life, I never went back to that street. Never saw that house again. I didn't need to. Because whatever he built there was never as stable as he thought. And once the foundation cracked, everything else follows. People think revenge is loud.
Dramatic.
Explosive. But the truth? The most dangerous kind of revenge is quiet. It waits. It watches. And when the moment is right, it doesn't destroy everything. It simply removes the illusion and lets reality do the rest.